Hello and welcome to My Nature Diaries. I wanted to show you how I'm going to lay out these spring flowers that you saw some clips of previously. And I'm going to do three, 1, 2, and 3. And I like to use different numbers, odd numbers. And as I lay those out, stagger them, I'm also going to put a text box over here on the right, and then as well as integrated within the spread. Now your eye moves from the left to the right, so that's a great way to plan your layout. Here is the reference photo from my last wildflower that I'm drawing, this Jack in the Pulpit. And because of the way the other flowers are, I really want to flip this flower over, and you can do that with your own pictures. And so go ahead and you can freehand it or trace it. That was sap green that you saw, and I'm taking this flat wash brush and going over with pretty clean water. There's a little bit of green on there, but I'm just going to put a background in, and I'm going to be using, again, that sap green mostly all over the flowers, just avoiding anything that's not green. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some ultramarine blue just for some depth and interest. I added Viridian green to the sap green and ultramarine blue, and using my Princeton size number 2 snap paintbrush, I'm just pulling the paint through these fine cut leaves and just putting on this first layer very lightly. This particular wildflower is called squirrel corn, and I actually consulted my naturalist brother, and he confirmed that that's exactly what this wildflower is. I'm finishing up this flower by adding just a variety of different greens, and I'm adding more blues when I feel like the flower or this plant is in shadow. Just using those same greens, I'm going in on this wild geranium leaf, and it has a lot of bumps and ridges, and I'm just using my paintbrush to kind of create that idea. I have finished for now with this left-hand side. I'm going to go back in later and put details. But for now, I want to go ahead and work on this Jack in the Pulpit. And this was a flower that I had been looking for the last several springs, and I couldn't find it. And all of a sudden, when we were on this hike, it just popped out at me. I don't know how. Of course, I was looking for it, but it was really a fun discovery. I haven't seen one of these in a very, very long time. It's important whenever you are drawing or painting a wildflower or plant to highlight a feature, at least one, of that particular plant that you associate with it. And in this case, it's these stripes that are on the actual flower. And I wanted to make sure that they would show up, because that's something that you can reference later in the field when you are looking for it through your own nature journal. And when you paint it, which is different from a photo, those differences usually stand out much more because they're much more subtle in a photo. And I think the advantage of having the painting is that you can highlight those differences, and it forces you to remember when you go out and actually see the flower in the wild that, oh, that's right, this has a really subtle stripe. And it's a way to help you identify something that might not be as different like this particular flower is. Some wildflowers, like this one, they bloom first and then their leaves appear, and there was one leaf around the cluster of these Jack in the Pulpits, and I wanted to make sure, and I did confirm it with another photo just to make sure I had the correct leaf shape, because the more information I can include in my nature journal and my nature diary, the better chance I'll have of being able to identify it later. So I went ahead and included at least one leaf with the rest of the flowers. As you can see, I am drawing and painting this from my own video and photo references, but even if you do paint or draw on site somewhere, I think it's good wisdom or advice maybe to take a photo or video of that same flower or whatever it is that you're painting. That way you can always reference it if you don't feel like you got a good sketch earlier or you just want to double check. Using alizarin crimson, which is this pinky color, I'm going to echo those wild geranium flowers for the title and the different lettering and script that I use. And I just kind of look online to find maybe an interesting typeface or font, and you can do the same as well, or just use your own handwriting style and put in a nice title. It does add a lot to your nature journal, I think. The next step is for me to get out my dip pen, and I'm using this Chiikawa and my Kuretake ink. And this ink is waterproof, but I prefer to ink after I paint something. I like to, as you saw, I make a rough drawing with pencil, and then I roughly color it in with watercolor, and it does look a little rough, but I know I'm going to ink it later, and that makes the difference is if you know the process that you're going to be using to paint. And for me, it just feels like a little bit more loose and free if I do it this way. But you can of course do it any way that you want. If you prefer to ink first and then to watercolor over it, that can be more like a coloring book, and there's a little bit more control maybe with it. But for me, I like this sketchy looser style that happens when you paint and then you kind of go back and ink in details. It feels like sometimes you can just find texture. I don't know, like there's just sometimes I feel like you can paint better with your brush details than I can always illustrate with an ink or pen drawing. Painting in watercolor and then using ink creates more of an illustrative style in my thoughts, and it also allows me to be able to use paper that's not as good. This paper I'm using here isn't too bad, but this notebook or sketchbook is relatively inexpensive, so if it keeps me nature journaling and painting and drawing, then I feel like it's just a much better method to keep the illustration simple, and that way you're going to want to paint and nature journal even the more. And of course, my final step is going to be just adding lines, which I'm going to do very loosely with my mechanical pencil, or the main thing is to leave light lines. And I do this because there's no way I'm going to keep it straight otherwise. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that in with just some information about the flowers. I would just like to invite you, if you haven't already, to subscribe to My Nature Diaries for more information on what to do, how to nature journal as I complete my nature diaries or nature journals. And also let me know if you nature journal yourself, if you are an avid one, a beginner, and also what inspires you for your own layouts. It's so important to share this information. One problem with a dip pen is it can smear, so I did get a smear on the left hand side, but I'm leaving it there. I need it to dry completely, and then I'm going to just go ahead and use my Uniball Signo white gel pen to clean that up, which you can do, or you can also use white gouache if you needed to do that as well. Well, that pretty much does it for this entry, and as always, I really enjoyed just adding these beautiful flowers, and they're called spring ephemerals because they're really here today and gone tomorrow, and I feel like I've captured that lightness and fragility of these beautiful spring wildflowers. And I hope you were inspired by this layout and design, and if you were, make sure please to like and of course subscribe and comment. And I really appreciate you joining me on this nature journaling adventure. Well, I hope you remember that you are amazing and creative, and until next time, bye.